Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I'm super excited to have you guys a part of this episode and my awesome guest, Miss Holly Morphew. So if you will, Miss Holly, introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into your space.
Oh, well, Kat, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and just connect with you and have a great conversation. I'm Holly Morphew. I am the CEO and founder of Financial Impact, and we help professionals and entrepreneurs create personal wealth and financial independence. So by trade and my industry, I'm known as an accredited financial counselor. That is my certification. But I really call myself a financial coach. And I started teaching personal finance, it's been 17 or 18 years ago now, because in my early 20s, I realized that I was having a very different experience with money than my friends were. And I didn't know why. And so I just started to ask the question, what is different about my experience with money than some of my friends? And as an example, I bought a house when I was young because my parents had really encouraged me to, and I'll share kind of the bigger backstory behind it in a minute. And I found that it was just a really empowering experience for me. A friend of mine moved in with me. She had super cheap rent and it was helping me pay my mortgage. And what I realized is that a lot of my friends they didn't want to talk about money, or they were confused about money, or didn't understand credit, or were going into debt and felt some shame around that. And so I thought, well, gosh, what is a way that I can help people feel more empowered when it comes to money? And so I went to my Rotary Club, which is an international service organization, and I proposed to the board a service project where I would go to local high schools and teach young adults about money before they graduated and got into the real world so that they could really start out on the right foot. And they gave me their blessing, and off I went teaching this little workshop to high school, really juniors and seniors. And it was so fun, Kat. It was so fun. I love talking about money because there's a lot of creativity behind it, but there's also a lot of knowledge. And my first course was called What You Need to Know That You Didn't Learn in School, because, what's the point of getting an education? It's to get a job. And, we all want to get a great job that can give us the lifestyle that we want. So at the end of the day, the whole point of it all, from education on up to the job, is to create a certain kind of lifestyle for ourselves. And so that's really what excites me about being a financial coach, is that, money is infinite and abundance is our natural state, but wealth building truly is 20% strategy. And that strategy is really important, and 80% mindset. And so a lot of times we don't know where we're blind until we're working with a coach who can, show us another way or reframe something so that it empowers us around money or even income instead of disempowering us.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I love that it's such a young age you notice the difference, because I feel like I fell into the category of not knowing anything about money in my 20s, right? It wasn't really talked about in our household. My father is the one that kind of handled all that, right? I had more of the older upschool bringing where the male took care of it. And that was kind of like the thing, right? I think I remember learning in school in like 7th or 8th grade about like how to fill out a checkbook, but that was really about it, right? I know my kids now have an actual finance course they're required to take, that gives them a little bit more information, but still, like at that age, I don't think a lot of people think, nor do they fully understand what it means to like have credit, or what it means when you have a credit card and what that looks like. My oldest one's 19 and we've been talking about that and what revolving credit is and what it looks like to have good standing, but you're not spending over in what you have, and how it can fall back on you. When I came out of my abusive relationship, I ended up having to file for bankruptcy because I had credit cards and ran all of them up and had no clue what any of that meant, right? So I had to learn the hard way. So now I teach my kids of like the do's and don'ts, don't do what mom did kind of a thing. But it's so unique to know that you learn that at such a young age and realize that, people really do have not only a strategy issue, but a mindset issue, depending on how they've been brought up as well. So I would love to hear your intake on the mindset piece, because I know that you said 80% is mindset and only 20% strategy, which is really unique because I've never heard that before.
Yeah. And before I even get there, Kat, I want to mention that it is so awesome that your kids have it sounds like a personal finance course. You had said finance course in their curriculum that's mandatory. And that's something that's really changing and has changed in the past, I would say, 15 to 20 years, is that we are starting to wake up and realize that when we educate young adults, or at least people when they're entering the workforce, what they can do to get their needs met in a way that feels really safe and secure. Like if you apply for the apartment, you're going to get it. If you need a credit card, a line of credit, you're going to get it. When you go to buy a house, you can get approved for that loan. So I love that, your kids' education is evidence that this is changing. So to answer your question on mindset, for me, it really wasn't until I went through a divorce after 10 years of being married that I realized I had been living, even though I had created a certain like net worth for myself and I had dug myself out of $67,000 of credit card debt when I was living paycheck to paycheck. That was the beginning of my own personal wealth journey. That was the beginning of realizing that, when I called my financial advisor to ask for help, he asked me how much more money I wanted to invest. And that was the moment when I, again, like so many realizations around this time in my life, I realized that even my financial advisor couldn't support me with the problem that I was having. Because he wanted me to invest more money, but I didn't have money to invest. So it was like, where is the person who was going to help me get what I ultimately wanted, which was more freedom and choices in life? And so that's what led me to creating I just learned everything that I could about passive income, wealth management, personal finance, debt elimination, entrepreneurship, all within about a 12-month span. And then I started to apply it to my personal finances. And then 3 years later, I was debt free. And then shortly after that, I had money in the bank. And then I just kept on going. And then in my 30s, I became financially independent. But I didn't become FI until I went through my divorce. And it was a time of like really having to look at myself deeply. And I knew that at this point in my life, everything was really up to me. I didn't have anybody to fall back on. And because we ran a business together, most of my income went away in our divorce because we made many agreements in our divorce about how we would divide our assets and that kind of thing. And one of our agreements was that he would keep this business that we had started. and which was, it did really well, and it paid both of us. And, we had employees, and then I kept a property that we had bought together, and, and then kind of off I went to basically start over from square one with
Yeah.
income. And at the time I was teaching personal finance on the side, and I was consulting for a software company doing some corporate finance and HR. But that was when I realized if I didn't get like serious or intentional and really take responsibility for my future, then I was just going to float through life and, potentially go into debt again, or end up in a job that I didn't really want because I was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And it took really the support of a community, being involved in an amazing community of people who were not only, wealthy, which is what I wanted for myself, but also kind and nourishing and intelligent and on my team. And, just by being in a community like that, which made me feel like I was safe, and I was getting good information. One day at a time, one step at a time, I started to adopt personal practices into my life that I had never done before. Things like daily meditation, things like making it a priority to spend time in nature, moving my body on a regular basis, whether it was yoga or exercise or just some stretching or maybe a little weightlifting, using words of affirmation, really understanding principles of manifestation and the laws of increase, and the law of attraction, and listening to my intuition, learning how to tap into my inner knowing, like all of these things that in my old sort of masculine way of being, the Holly who crushed $67,000 of credit card debt in 3 years would never have been open to. And once I started to understand that what I think about, I bring about, and that there is no end to all the joy and money and abundance that we want to create in our life. It's really just a matter of how much will we allow ourselves to receive. And that's when my life really started to shift. And so now, I get like money is so simple. That's why my book is called Simple Wealth. Like it is so simple to build the pillars of wealth. Like we all know these things. Like I talk about the golden rule of money: earn more than you spend, pay yourself first, give every dollar a purpose. Like, yes, that's important. And then the pillars of wealth: maximize cash flow, eliminate high interest rate debt, strategically save, and create residual income. Like that's it. That's all there is to it. But what is it that keeps us on track when we're tempted, at least for me, being an impulsive spender, tempted to go on the $10,000 trip instead of the $2,000 trip, or buy the $500 pair of jeans or shoes or whatever instead of the 100, when I have a financial goal. And so that discipline that's required to make those money behavioral choices, it does come down to so many things like self-esteem and safety and connection and community. And so I know I'm combining a very practical subject, money, with something that's super esoteric, which is, I don't know, the idea of infinite expansion, but they are related.
Mm-hmm. No, I can agree with that. And, it's something that you said that's interesting too, is while you were talking about understanding the different pieces, the different pillars of wealth, you also mentioned what kind of a spender you are, which means, right, in my opinion, understanding who you are at your core. And when you can start to learn who you are, the things that you do, or the things that you enjoy, right? Like if you like to spend money when you take a trip because you would prefer to have the luxuries, that's something that you enjoy. Knowing of that, being aware of where that is, helps, I feel like, define where you can then create strategies that are going to work best for you, right? Because it's super easy for people to get caught up in a one size fits all method, right? And like you said, the pillars make so much sense to me, and how you have that broke up. And within those pillars, understanding who you are, how you operate, how you spend, or how you would like to spend is going to help you decide what strategy works best for you and which way that you save works best for you, and going about it that way versus just taking, one person that's like, oh, I saved all this money, I made $1 million. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So that should work for me. Right? Like, I'm all about people understanding who they are, because when you can understand who you are, like you said, you understood that, you learned about yourself. It's like opening another door, right? Because then you can take all the things in that you like from other people, and you have the ability to kind of tweak it to work best for you and your life.
Yeah. Bingo. That's it. That's it. And, we all have so many different stories when it comes to money. I mean, I work with a lot of high achieving, high earning career professionals and entrepreneurs who, a lot of people, it's like, I'm really good at making money. I just don't know how to manage it. Or, I have a great job and a great career and I just keep getting promoted and, I'm learning all these new skills, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to stop working because I don't have, an assets or, a retirement account or, whatever it is. And that's exactly it. Like, all of my programs begin with an Enneagram quiz because it's helpful for me to know what motivates people and how people are driven. And then once people know it for themselves, that's also, like you said, self-awareness. It's like, was it Socrates that said, know thyself? Because then we can start to cultivate an environment that serves our highest and best good. And that was a big thing that I had to do during those 3 years that I was eliminating my debt, as I started to think about places or times in my life when I would be tempted to spend, times when I might not even stop and take a breath and just, here's my credit card, charge whatever you want on it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the temptation was so strong. And so, for example, I stopped spending time in places where I could spend money. Like if I had a dinner reservation, for example, I wouldn't go to the bookstore next door and like wait for 30 minutes because inevitably I'd probably buy something. Or like if I had a meeting, I probably wouldn't go into Starbucks because isn't there always a good time to have a coffee, even if it's before a meal? And so, I could always find a reason to spend money. And like, I even have this strategy still today because I'm a highly sensitive person. And so like, I walk into environments with a lot of people and a lot of things, and I immediately, like, I start to kind of shut down. And so this has really served me when I go into grocery stores, is I just keep my eyes kind of straight and like sort of softly focused on the ceiling, and I just go exactly where I need to go so that I don't have to make those choices. If I can't see it, then I don't have to think about it. And then I don't have to go through that whole like, oh, I want it, but I shouldn't spend money on it. And it's like, I don't go to shopping malls. Like, nope, I don't do that. I have very strategic ways to shop and save money. It's actually a module in one of my courses because, spending money is fun and that's why we earn it. I love having guilt-free spending. I use a spending strategy so that, any of the money that I spend, I already have it. And it's, I never have to give it a second thought because I have a budget for it every month. That's fail-proof, where money goes from my personal checking account into my Chime account, which is a preloaded debit card. And then it's like every month I have a pretty good idea of how much money I want to spend. And every week that account gets replenished. And as long as I don't spend on credit cards or anywhere else, I never overspend. And so it's a strategy that I created to curb my impulsive spending, or just worrying that, okay, well, I set a budget of $1,000, but I spent 1,200. How do I keep that from happening again? So little things like that make a big difference.
They do make a big difference. And I love that too, because I have such a habit in the grocery store, right? Especially if I see something on sale and I'm like, oh, but that would be so good. So I got to the point to where I do not shop in the grocery store anymore. Everything I do is ordered online and I go and pick it up. So the only time I have to go in the grocery store is if we run out of milk or bread, and I'm like, okay, it's like 3 items. And then I can run in, grab the stuff I need and come out. But I know that if I need to spend money in the grocery store, I am tempted to look at some of the other things, especially if they're on sale. So like that is my strategy, especially having two teenage boys. Okay, come on. Like they always want something. They could always snack on something. There's always something that can be
Oh yeah.
included. So I always try to be very aware of that with my kids, and because I want to give them everything, right? So I try to be very aware of that as well. And then that way, I curve, like you said, curve that spending problem of wanting to buy the things that are on sale. It's a lot of the reason why I buy things on Amazon. I don't have to go into the store to try and find it, right? It's a lot easier for me to just say, okay, I know that I want this. I know this is what it usually costs, and be done with it so that I don't look at everything else. So I would ask then, if you had someone that was really wanting to just start trying to figure out like how to budget, they know that something needs to change, what would you say would be like the top 2 or 3 things that they should kind of focus on to start going in that direction?
Yeah, I had to do this exercise for myself, and this is what I do, in my day job. So, you know, wealth building really starts from one place. So there's one number in your personal finances that is the key to unlocking your wealth. It's the most important number of your personal finances, and I call it your impact number. And your impact number is every 30 days, your income minus your expenses, whatever is left over. And if you're willing to do this exercise every 30 days to calculate your income coming in, calculate your expenses going out, it can be your forecasted expenses, like what you think is going to go out, and then whatever money you have left over. If you're willing to do that, because that money that you have left over, you're either going to be negative or positive. And if you find that you're negative, which is where I was when I started my journey to wealth, I was literally spending more money than I had because I had easy access to credit, which is the reality of a lot of people's personal financials, because American household debt just exceeded $1 trillion for the first time. It's the highest debt that we've ever had as a country. And this is a very big number. It's a very big number, and it's very alarming. So, spread that over most Americans' households who are carrying debt. And not every household is carrying debt, but many of them are. And, you might see someone and think that they're doing so well financially, but we just don't know the truth of what's going on with people's personal finances, because there's just so many ways to put a mask on. And when it comes to money, but if you find that you're negative, well, then the first objective is just to get positive. And, you can start by reducing or eliminating expenses. You can also start by creating additional streams of income, which I did both. I started, the very first thing I did was create awareness, because awareness is the seed of transformation. So once I became willing to, number one, look at my credit card balances, like I got home from work, this night after I had literally driven 40 miles to my office in the snow in my Honda Accord, when like the whole state of Colorado was shut down. Like, true story. I called my boss that morning and said, I don't think I should come into work. Like, I think I'm risking my life. And she said, well, if you don't come in, you're fired. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
well, everyone thinks I'm so successful because I'm young and I've got a house and this great job and a car and this lifestyle. But like and when I really started to think about it, because I was stressed about money, like I had more month than money, always waiting to get paid to pay my bills. And that in that moment, when she said, if you don't come in, you're fired, I thought, well, if I don't get my next paycheck, I won't be able to make my mortgage payment or my car payment. I was like, I'm literally living in a house of cards. Like, all the things that society tells me, that's the thing that really gets me even to this day, almost like brings tears to my eyes. Like, if you can see me, I'm kind of tearing up, because I was living this version of success that I didn't choose for myself. And I realized if I kept doing that, my life would never change. and nothing would ever change for me. And so, I did make it to work and home that night, and I got out my credit card statements and I added up my balances, and I was like, oh my God, I have a big problem. Like, I'm calling my financial advisor tomorrow. And, it's not just that I was doing mental accounting. So I had an idea of what was coming in and an idea of what was going on. I really wasn't looking at my money. I was not having this money date every 30 days where I calculated my impact number. I was just guessing. It wasn't just the impulsive spending. I mean, that was all part of it. The mental accounting, the impulsive spending, having expensive taste, it's who I am. I just can't help it. My mom always jokes, Holly, if we walk into a store, you're always going to find the most expensive thing in it to buy. Which I don't really know how to feel about that, but apparently it has proven to be true in the past. But I went into credit card debt when I was 20, just 23 years old, because when I was 20, I was diagnosed with a chronic illness. And I, like most young people, I just didn't know how to deal with it. I was in complete denial, and I was very sick for 4 years. I could not walk off and on, had an autoimmune disease. Doctor said it would not go away. And I had periods of remission and periods of what they call flare, autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis, which affects the gut. And so after I graduated from college, which I managed to make it through college, really hid this from pretty much everyone. I moved to the East Coast with, my 3 best girlfriends to start my life, still in denial. My insurance did not cover my medication, which was $5,000 a month. And when I got sick, I needed it. I needed it for survival. And so I put it on my credit cards, which on the one hand, like, thank God I had them. My mom had helped me establish credit when I was young. And so I was able to just, and by the time I realized it was not sustainable, I moved back home and lived with my parents, because I needed that, not just the nurture, but also to not have that huge expense, like top line item of most people's budget, which is housing. So they didn't charge me rent, and I was able to get better and recuperate. But I had already dug myself into about $30,000 of credit card debt at that point, like before I even really started, my life. And so there are so many reasons. And I just share that story because, wherever you are listening, like, don't let shame overtake you when it comes to money. Like, this journey, most people are walking it blind, because most people don't get a course like your sons did, Kat, about how to manage our money. And not to mention, I'm actually writing an article right now for savings advice on, like, multiple streams of income. I have 12 streams of income, and I've been building them for many years, and some are bigger than others. But the truth is that housing, education, healthcare, and now inflation have created conditions that are very difficult for people to get ahead anymore. So it's like, we also need a 2-stream income household anymore to live a certain quality of life, at least in the United States. And that's the truth of it. And I don't want to go too deeply into this, but I also, we're all here to expand and grow and learn. And I think being a truth teller is really important. And each year when I get my continuing education units for my accredited financial counselor certification, we are privy to the surveys and the data that some of these wonderful organizations are doing in the United States to measure how Americans are feeling about their money and how Americans are actually doing with their money. And the truth is that from 2009 to, I think it was 2020, so an 11-year span, Americans' financial literacy actually declined.
Oh, wow.
So, and it's not just financial literacy, it's, you add on to that, how quickly we're faced with information and asked to make spending decisions. And so it can be a lot. And that's what I'm getting at. So if all of this made you feel a little tight in the chest, I don't know about you, but I'm shaking it out, and I'm going to take a deep breath, because there is light at the end of this tunnel, and it starts right here, just with this conversation, and just with the question that you ask, Kat, what's the first step that you can do? Just create awareness. Just be willing to look at your money, take that deep breath and look at it and face it, because from there you can start to decide, okay, well, what's the most important pillar of wealth? We build them in order. I've got high interest rate debt. I'm going to crush that debt. And if you want to know how to do it, shoot me an email or find me on Instagram. Like, it's not a secret. I will walk you through it and tell you how to do it. And I also have a ton of free resources on my website, financialimpact.com, because I have a whole section of free resources, because I feel like financial education should be free. Coaching is a different story. Coaching has changed my life. Like, I will never be without a coach. It's just, you get there so much faster with someone holding your hand. But, the education and the access, like, we have the ability today to disperse it. So we have an amazing personal financial community who's out there blogging and writing and sharing everything that you need to know to, get on your path to building wealth.
Yeah. And I appreciate all the free resources, because, it's funny that you were talking about how you've seen and heard of this increase and the amount of debt that consumers have put on. And I literally was just in a real estate class not too long ago, where a lender was giving a presentation, and they were talking about the increase in debt from 2020 to now. And it was like a 22% increase on household debt, which then keeps people from being able to buy a home, because you've got a debt to ratio income. Like, it is insane to see the impact that it's making on people, and yet prices and everything else keep rising. But there isn't, like you said, there aren't a ton of free resources, at least that I can find. Because even when I had money issues, and I still deal with things, right? My husband and I have conversations all the time, because he learned to deal with money a long time ago, whereas I didn't learn how to deal with money until I got in my 30s, right? I filed for bankruptcy at 28. And so I started over, but I didn't know what any of that meant. I was so busy focused on my children and my job and put myself back to school, that financing it just wasn't a thing, right? So it wasn't until I bought my first home that I was like, oh, like, okay, so couponing is a thing and finding great deals is a thing, like, and I enjoyed that. But like you said, people have to become very self-aware and have to be willing to take that risk of being uncomfortable and looking at what you are spending your money on. Look at where your money is going, break it down and see, like, okay, are these all needs or are these just things I really want, right? And look at what that means in your life. And again, like we said in the beginning, it allows you to also define who you are, right? If you're someone that you see in your spending, you buy a lot of nice things, and like, that's who you are, great. Now you can create something that can allow you for that lifestyle. And now how can you get to that lifestyle? My husband's the same way. I swear every time we walk in somewhere, he finds the most expensive piece item every single time, right? But that's his thing. He loves eclectic things. He loves things that are very one-off, unique pieces, which is wonderful. And I adore them. It's just not necessarily something that I immediately see. And because of what I put myself through financially, I'm also a lot more aware, and it makes me nervous, right, to spend money like that, where my husband's on a different level in the way that he's been able to do that, which is why we've had a lot of conversations around that. And that throws in a whole nother realm of dealing with money when you've got finances with couples, right?
Absolutely.
That's like, that's like level number 5. And so that can be confusing all in itself, right? And not everybody agrees with how that should be done, right? There's a lot of people that are what I consider more old school, which is my opinion, right? Which is everything goes into one account and everything's done through that hub. And then there's people that keep things more separate. I, especially being through a lot of issues with finances and not being able to trust other people, that was something that my husband and I established when we decided to be together. He had his account, I had mine, and then we had one together. That is what did our spending. And as long as bills were paid for, then the money that we had extra was what we got to do with it, so that we had a little bit of flexibility in ourselves and we weren't complaining and bitching each other out because he went off and bought this one thing, right? Like if you've got the extra money and that's your thing, cool, do it. And we did that to create a sense of peace with how we run our relationship, right? And everybody is different. So I'm not knocking anyone, but that's something you have to be aware of as well, right? It's very different if it's just you and you're managing just you. I was a single mother for a really long time. I was managing me and two children, right? That's totally different. Then when you get into a relationship, that's another whole aspect. And so I love the fact of, like you said, kind of having this money date once a month where you are sitting down and going over the things that you're spending on and having that conversation and making sure that you're hyper aware of it and it's at the forefront of your brain so that you don't get 6 months, 2 years down the road and go, holy crap, what just happened? How are we going to get out of this? What kind of loans can I get now to consolidate and have to start all over? Like so many people that I've talked with have had to do, myself included.
Yeah. And we learn, and thank you for sharing that, Kat, because I know that helps somebody who's listening, who's like, how should I manage my money with my partner? Because there are so many ways to do it. And there's no such thing as a right way or a perfect way. Like it's what's right for you. And again, like just as you so beautifully illustrated, it is about tapping into what feels right for me and then communicating that, using our voice to communicate where we have boundaries around money, where we're blind with money, where we could use improvement. And that's the beautiful thing about being in relationship with someone. If you are going to financial independence together, it can become a collaborative effort because usually in relationships, we've got opposites. And instead of that being a bad thing, it can be a really good thing and it can really serve us. And so I love that. And, going back to, our values and who we are, when we know what it is that we value, we can start matching the experiences that we spend on and the things that we spend money on to those core values. And it's a really simple way to kind of filter out the noise. It's just like, no, I'm not even going to give that my attention. Because today, really, the competition in the world is for our attention. Because when people get our attention, then they can get our money more easily. And so, knowing what's really important for you, well, it's like, when you decide that you want a yellow car and then you see yellow cars everywhere, it's kind of the same thing. It's like my core values are community, creativity, authenticity, love, freedom. And so and health, and nature. So knowing that, like, it kind of helps me gravitate towards how I use my money toward those things or not for other things.
Yeah. I love that. That it almost helps kind of categorize what you are willing to spend your money on and then what you choose not to. And I think that can make it a lot easier when you do get in those situations, right? Where you get something, a shiny object, right? Thrown in front of you and you're like, oh, but it's such a great deal. Going back to understanding who you are. And like you said, knowing your core values and does that align with it? Or is it just something that it's cute and it's pretty and you'd like to have like in the moment,
right?
But not necessarily
and there's so many
way down the
pretty
road.
things I want, like I could fill my whole house with these things.
Yeah.
But, I've had another thing that I did sort of going back to like cultivating an environment is I live in a small 1,000 square foot condo. And because of that means, I can't have big parties unless we go down. I live in an amazing, like well-certified building. It's like living on a cruise ship. So I can have parties. We do them in the lounge. But because my place is so small, I automatically know, like, I don't spend on knickknacks or, that, like, it's just an automatic no. I don't even have to give it any energy, which is wonderful because when I lived in my house, which is 3,500 square feet, it could just get filled up. And which led, to like anxiety because there's so much stuff and everything has energy. And so you can start to see how this money conversation, like when we really start to get clear on what do we want our money to do for us and how do we want to feel when it comes to money, our whole life, like even our relationships start to improve because we've become so clear on what is it that we want to create with our money.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so beautifully put too, right? Because it comes back to having a choice. And a lot of us forget that you ultimately do have a choice. Even if it's a choice you don't want to have to make, you still have a choice. But people forget that that is still an option, right? So I love that you bring that up and make that a clarification for people to understand that like it is still there. It may not necessarily be that you want to, but it's still there. We still do have options. You just have to learn to be aware of it. So I appreciate that tremendously. As we come to the closing of the podcast, the one thing I always ask all of my guests is, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice that you would like to leave the audience with?
A favorite quote or piece of advice. Well, I always end with every day you're either building wealth or you're not. It does not matter how much money you make. What matters is how much you keep and what you do with it.
That's one to think on for sure. Oh, I like that. Well, thank you, Holly, so much. That I hope you guys are writing that one down. And please do us all a favor and definitely share with us where can people find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world? I know you have tons of resources as well to share with people too. So share away.
I really do. Yeah, I've worked hard over the years to, give everyone who wants a place in this wealth conversation and wherever you are on your wealth journey to find a soft place to land and really get started. So I have a free community, which has been just so amazing. We do monthly money dates together. So go to my website, financialimpact.com, and you'll see there where you can join the community. And then you can find me on the socials. You can find me on LinkedIn at Holly Morph. You can find me on Instagram at Holly Morph, HOLLYMORPH.
Awesome. And we'll be sure, of course, to link all that information in the show notes so that you guys can easily find Holly and get in her world, and definitely check out some of those resources. Like I'm going to go look at them as well. I think my oldest one could use them too, so that it's not mom telling him everything.
You go.
Right?
Smart woman.
Thank you so much, Holly, for all of the information and all the goodness that you shared with the group, the audience today. So I can't thank you enough for coming on and being a guest. And to everybody else that's out there, I hope you guys got some amazing takeaways and were taking notes. And if not, you better go check out her free resource section on her website. And don't forget, until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day in your life and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.